Hey ladies, it's Jeremiah from GaymeBar. The Jockeys asked me to come and talk to you about some 3DS games. So today we're going to cover Ghost Recon Shadow Wars. Ghost Recon Shadow Wars is probably about the most game that you're going to be able to get from the 3DS launch lineup. It kind of looks like Ubisoft had an old DS project that had been thrown off to the side that they decided to revive for the launch. The 3D effect does very little to add anything to Ghost Recon's lack of visual splendor. If anything, it just kind of makes it look like you're looking down on a 3D game board. It is one of the few games that I have seen, though, for the 3DS where you can crank the 3D all the way up reasonably comfortably and not have to worry about it. That's not saying much considering it doesn't really give you anything for it, but if you like to crank the 3D all the way up without your eyeballs trying to melt out of your head, it's a good game to start with. While Ghost Recon does offer a fair amount of content, especially up against all of the other mediocre launch games, it lacks severely in the character department. All of the characters really are kind of like G.I. Joe stand-ins. Even the leader of the squad is named Duke, which seems ever so slightly suspicious when you really think about it. Your entire squad is divided up obviously into the standard one, the heavy weapons specialist, the medic, the engineer, the sniper, and the spy sniper, kind of. It's the one that you can't see. Sure, great. The combat system in Shadow Wars plays like a mashup of existing strategy games, such as Advance Wars. There's maybe a little bit of Valkyria Chronicles in there. It kind of has the general feel of the Syndicate, with the tech upgrades and just kind of the way that the characters are presented in general. And maybe a little bit of Final Fantasy Tactics works itself in there. Every single turn, you go through moving your entire squad, and then the enemy will move theirs. Now, while the premise of Shadow Wars and the characters are paper thin, what you're here for is the combat, and thankfully they've given you something good. As you're moving your squad around the board during your turn, you're going to have to take into account cover, line of sight, height, and actually even proximity of your other squad mates. So with Shadow Wars, you're looking at about 37 story missions, 20 or so skirmish missions, and then there's a handful of multiplayer maps. Sadly, I didn't get a lot of time with the multiplayer, as it legitimately is the least interesting part. The multiplayer mode in Shadow Wars probably could have been left out. It's kind of an afterthought if you really look at it. It's not even a system-to-system multiplayer mode. It's pass and play. And while I suppose that if you had a friend over and you couldn't think of anything better to do while they were there, I suppose you could break out Shadow Wars and, I don't know, like, bore each other to death or something. Instead of just your usual set of objectives that you would expect from a game like Ghost Recon Shadow Wars, Skirmish Mode offers maps that are a little bit more like puzzles. For example, one of the first ones that you get is that you're going to be fending off a horde of enemies with just 3 snipers, maybe guarding a position with an engineer and just a handful of turrets. It's a little bit more, puzzle may not be the best word to use, but it's kind of the feeling that you get, as you're going to have to think about it just a little bit more than simply moving your characters around the board and making sure that you're the one that doesn't get killed. So if you jumped in at the launch of the 3DS and you're kind of looking for a game to play, if strategy RPGs are your thing, then Ghost Recon is going to do it for the money. There's a lot of game there for you to sink your teeth into, and hopefully it will keep you occupied until the next wave of sadly mediocre games shows up. Well, that'll do it for Ghost Recon Shadow Wars. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to stop by the GaymeBar from time to time.